Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Culture and Coffee podcast for Monday, the 29th of May, 2023. I hesitated there because today it's not culture and coffee at all. It's actually culture and mulled wine. So, listen, there's a reason why. I'm just going to try and defend myself. I know the regular listeners, you're probably really into your coffee. You're like, he's betrayed us. How dare he? We only tune in for the coffee. We're not interested in the culture stuff. I get it. And so I'm apologising, right? So I've got a lovely Kenyan coffee that I bought. And listen, I'm pre-recording this. So it's Sunday afternoon at 4 p.m. So my football team, for those of you who know, I support a team called Everton. They've got to win tomorrow morning, Australia time. They've got to win to avoid relegation. So it's kind of a big deal. We've been terrible all season. Don't even get me started about the culture of Everton. So I'm going to get up. Actually, I'm not going to get up. I'm not going to bed. So they kick off 1:30 and the game will probably end, I don't know, about 3:30. So yeah, the thought of getting up at 6:30 to record the podcast is a no-no. So I was like, I'm going to record the podcast, like, you know, I was going to do it tonight, but then the Monaco Grand Prix is on. I want to see if Max Verstappen continues to dominate that. So I've got this whole evening / early morning planned of sport. So I'm like, right, I'll do the podcast. Sunday afternoon, I'll record it early. I get a lovely Kenyan coffee. Now I returned from Europe last week after being over there for a few weeks doing some work there. And I brought back with me jet lag, as you do when you come back from Europe, and also the flu. So I've kind of got flu lag, which is not great. And so the thought of drinking coffee, I was just like, you know what? It's just not what I feel like. It's raining outside. It's a bit grim. It's cold weather-wise. And you know when you go somewhere a bit warmer and you kind of get used to it, and then you come back and even though it's not cold, it still feels cold. I'm making mulled wine. That's what I'm doing. And I just love mulled wine. I don't know what it is. I just love mulled wine. And I use a really simple Jamie Oliver recipe. If you don't know it, right, just Google Jamie Oliver mulled wine. It's like 200 grams of caster sugar, 6 cloves, a cinnamon stick, 2 oranges, 2 bay leaves, and basically 2 bottles of red wine. And I'm using Malbec red wine, just to trying to give it some, I don't know, now I'm trying to sound professional. I'm using a Malbec red wine. Listen, it's not any red wine, really. You want something big and fruity. Anyway, I'm just going to have a taste of this mulled wine, because what are you going to do at 4 o'clock in the afternoon when the kids are out? This is what you're going to do. You're just going to get stuck into the wine. Yeah, that's exactly what I want. Listen, the Kenyan coffee can wait. I'm sure it's delicious, but it's not as delicious as that. Right, I've got a few things to say. Right, the team always say, can you please tell people to like and subscribe? And I always forget that, because usually it's stupidly early in the morning. That's the last thing on my mind. Oh, tell everyone to like and subscribe to the podcast. I just want to say, like, if you do that, that's fabulous. If you don't, like, you know, it's entirely up to you. But I just want to thank everyone who listens to this. You know, I think when I first started, like 20 people listened per episode. It's now like, I don't know, it's like 150 people per episode, which is fabulous. So I hope you're getting a lot of value from it. And I want to reiterate, if there's something that you want me to talk about, if there's something you want me to research, please do let me know. Right, you can message me on LinkedIn. You can email me at colin@colindellis.com. If you can join the community at culturemakers.community. Load of free stuff there. You can message me there. But I'm happy to talk about anything at all related to culture and mulled wine this week. Now, while I was away, I wrote a couple of what we call white papers. Now, if you don't know what a white paper is, go out and buy Culture Hacks. It's shameless. Oh my gosh, that's totally like I got a sick feeling in my stomach when I said that. So I wrote about what a white paper is in Culture Hacks. And I don't think teams and businesses make enough use of this. Is here's an idea that I can get out in the world, either something to be challenged or a bit of thought knowledge, really. I like to write papers kind of in between books. And I'd like to thank, who was it? Someone was like, Colin, last November you talked about the fact you were writing a book and you didn't provide any updates whatsoever. Who was that? Anyway, thank you, whoever that was. Yeah, so I pitched the book to a few publishers, and actually two are interested, which is really cool. So I'm just waiting for that to play out. But I've kind of put that on hold for the time being, because generally For those of you who don't know how books work, particularly when they're published. So if let's say I signed a contract next week, it would probably come out in a year. So there's a process. Now, I would still have to get it written in 3 months, and the bulk of my research is done, as I mentioned on the podcast before. So I pause that, but I don't want to stop researching. And so, big focus for my own work is this continued importance of relevance. And so every week I'm reading articles, I'm researching, I'm listening to other podcasts, I'm reading books, right? Like every week I have this relentless focus on new ideas, new content. So that when I deliver speeches, I did 2 last week, and when I deliver programs, I've got 1 coming up this week. There's new stuff in there. I don't want to ever deliver stuff. In 2015, what's the research said? It's 8 years old. And so when I've got lots of stuff to share, what I'd like to do is write either short books, like small books, of which the Hybrid Handbook was one, or white papers. So I've written 2 while I was away. I didn't want to actually sit and relax while I was away. When I could be working, why would I relax? And so I've got 2 coming out over the next few weeks. Now, if you want to be first to get a copy of these white papers, the community will always be the place where we drop them first. And I will be doing a little video to the community early this week. And so that's culturemakers.community. So there's 2 options. You can join for free, or you can pay to join. You get access to loads of programs. You can sign up to the newsletter, which is colindellis.com/boom. Or if you forget all of that, then you could just, if you follow me on LinkedIn, we'll be sharing the link where you can enter your email address and you can get a copy that way. Now, the first of the 2 will be directed at senior executives, right? So it's all about building a culture of success. And really what I'm talking about here is building a high performance culture. It's one of those things that gets talked a lot about. And so the subtitle is how leaders can achieve consistent high performance and avoid toxicity. Toxic cultures continue to make the news around the world, right? When I was in Spain 2 weeks ago, there was a story in the paper. I was using Google Translate. Thank you, Google, for Google Translate. So I picked up a Spanish paper and was just scanning through. Of course, why would I not just eat my breakfast and enjoy the beautiful view that I had in Mallorca? No. I had to get a newspaper and use Google Translate for toxic culture stories. I think it was an insurance company. There was a story in the UK. Of course there was. There seems to be loads. There was one here in Australia with a consulting firm around a toxic culture. And so I think, and I've been talking about this for about 18 months, is that culture is no longer a black box. And so what I wanted to do was to write a paper to give executives, and the second paper is for managers. So you feel free to read both. The first paper really is an education document for senior executives, because I still think many don't really understand culture. Some people in HR don't. So our senior executives go, who knows, right? So the framing for the paper is all around the fact that culture is no longer this black box. It's actually front and center now. And everyone's interested in it. Not only employees, but the media too. Sorry, I don't want to let my mulled wine go cold, because that's the most important part of the podcast. So employees are looking for purpose, they're looking for vision, they're looking for values, and where the values aren't lived, the media are all over that. When the purpose isn't lived, the media are all over that. All right, so it's not this thing that's hidden anymore; it's right there, front and center. Not only that, the world of work has changed significantly. It started to happen post-global financial crisis. Is all of a sudden what we had is a generation of people who were coming into the workforce. Parents were telling them different things than we were told as Gen Xers. So millennials were coming into the workforce. Gen Z latterly coming into the workforce, being told different things about finding your purpose and being told the warning signs of toxic culture. And then the pandemic really accelerated everything. Transformation happened faster. All of a sudden, we were in multi-location working. And what we saw, not only was a disconnection from culture during the pandemic, but we also saw a real erosion of belonging. Now, I want to make the point, and for those of you who listened to the podcast before, I've said this many, many times, I'm a big fan of hybrid working when it's done properly. The problem is very few people do it properly. Right? They say they're hybrid, but they're really, really not, because they don't have enough trust in people to do the right thing, or else people don't trust themselves to do the right thing, and they lack the discipline to do hybrid really, really well. So what we've got at the moment is almost a call back to the office because business leaders don't know what to do. And listen, look, I've got some empathy from that. I get it, but I don't as well, because I'm like, you just need to educate yourself a little bit more. You need to experiment. Anyway, this is not about hybrid. I've done quite a few on hybrid, so go back and just search Culture and Coffee hybrid. There's plenty there. So what I wanted to do in this paper, I'm giving you a little bit of a brief of this now, is really provide senior execs with a practical understanding of culture, its impact on performance and results, and to demonstrate that any investment made in culture is either financial or time is well spent. Now, anybody listening to this podcast who works in a great culture, you already know this. You know this because your organization will celebrate success. It won't tolerate brilliant jerks. It will actually take you off site for a couple of days a year to talk about how. Right, they've got a really clear strategy. They recognize the way to deliver that strategy is through an agreement on how we do things together. And so you guys know, and it's always a culture shock when you go to another organization and they don't do that stuff, right? Some of you will be nodding like, oh my God, previous job, we did all of that stuff. We had a great culture, but there was nowhere for me to go. And I left to join this other culture, this other company, and culture was rubbish. And all of a sudden we didn't do certain things. And then you spend your time as a manager trying to implement some of those things you know that work, which I'm going to talk about in the next white paper that I'll release. So I might do that in the next podcast. Actually, it makes sense for me to do that in the next podcast, is talk about the management paper. So I start by talking about the value of culture, and often we measure the value of culture through engagement scores. Really, the measurement of great culture is how easily or otherwise you achieve your results. And by easily, I don't mean you've achieved them with 2 months to spare. I mean, did you construct a plan? Did you deliver against the plan? Were people motivated? Were people rigid, or were they flexible in the way that they went about things? Did you see lots of poor behavior in the achievement of those results or not? You know, these for me are the key markers of the value of culture. So that obviously the higher the engagement, the more vibrant the culture. So anything less than 40%, you've kind of got a stagnant culture. Like, things are broken so badly that you really do need to do a bit of a reset, and I always say to senior leaders, usually it's someone at the top that's the problem. It's difficult for leadership teams, senior execs to hear. I understand that, having been in that position myself. But if you've got an engagement score that's 40% or less, something is broken at the top. And so you need to fix that first before you do anything. I remember meeting with a company in New Zealand. Excuse me a sec. I met with a company in New Zealand, and they had a really low engagement score. And they wanted me to work with them. And I do these kind of full year programs, and I thought this is going to be a really great kind of way to address the culture. And I worked closely with the head of HR, who I really, really liked. She was awesome, lots of energy, lots of ideas. And we really developed this over the course of a couple of meetings. We developed this rapport, and I was like, oh, this is going to be really, really good. I was really excited about doing the work. And I said, okay, cool. The next thing to do is to actually meet the CEO, get his commitment, because he's going to be the one that needs to role model what we expect of everybody else. And he didn't want to meet. And it was kind of awkward, because the head of HR, she was so apologetic, but she was just like, no, we just carry on despite him. I was like, but we can't do that. We need that person to be the figurehead for this piece of work. And for those who've listened to the podcast and, before, I don't really talk about a program necessarily. It's a word that we use sometimes to describe stuff. But because culture's evolutionary, it never really ends. And the program kind of ends. And so I talked about this initiative, and I know it's splitting hairs a little bit, but I said to the head of HR, we need to sit down with the CEO. He needs to make time. And in the end, he sent us both quite a terse email which, should have told me there and then. He sent it to the head of HR, but I was copied in, basically saying that culture was the fifth priority that he had. I can't even remember what the other four were. And at that point, I had to say to the head of HR, listen, it's clear that there's an issue at the top. Because if he's not invested in culture, and listen, I don't demand that it's number one priority all the time. Listen, I understand the challenges that different business leaders have. But, I don't know how much more proof I have to send people where if you actually get your culture right, then you get the results and the performance from that. You get the engagement from that. And so you really do need that commitment at the top. So anything less than 40% is a problem. Between 40 and 60%, things are okay. It's a bit pleasant. It's a bit nice. People are like, yeah, it's okay working here. But there's always this undercurrent of we're just not getting stuff done for one reason or another. I think once you get above 60%, you've got that desire to do well. So I always think between 60 and 75%, we've got that real commitment. It kind of oscillates between vibrant and combatant. And a combatant culture is where we understand the reason why, we just go about it in the wrong way. And anything north of 75%, which is where you want to be, that's where vibrant cultures live. That's where great performance lives. That's where high performance lives, like consistent high performance. And then your goal really is to get to between 85 and, in my experience, between 85 and 92 is the sweet spot. Because you can't keep everyone happy. There's always going to be about, and someone asked me at a conference last week, they was like, oh, what's the optimal attrition rate? I'm like, it's so hard to say that because every business is different. Every economic situation is different. Like if you can get between 10 and 15%, that's pretty good going. Some people just need to leave. They just do. Not everyone will be happy. Someone's always going to be disgruntled about something. So you just can't keep. It's never going to be 100%. So I talk about this in the paper. I talk about the fact that you with a vibrant culture and actually investing time and effort into that, you get things like, I don't know, higher sales, lower absenteeism, increased trust, greater innovation, lower turnover. You become a magnet for high potential people, but ultimately you get the results. You avoid toxicity because people are so invested in this thing called a vibrant culture that what they want to do is safeguard it. And as a leadership, as an executive team, what they need to do is role model what they expect of everyone else. And managers have to make sure it happens on a daily basis. And once that happens, and listen, I'm making it sound really easy. It's not, but it is when you teach people how to do it. And, when I release the management paper, it's going to be very much talk to managers about what you need to do in order to create a vibrant culture. But when you do all of that stuff, then you just get the results. Your brand reputation improves. Your Glassdoor score goes up if that's what you're interested in. And it really stems from senior execs understanding what culture is. And at its core, there are three elements to it. There's a social culture. Your social culture is kind of traditions, customs, laws, politics, lived experiences, belief systems, kind of in relation to the society in which you're in at that moment in time. So the social culture for me, right now I'm in Australia, so the social culture here is quite different. Last week I was in Spain, the week before that I was in the UK, week before that I was in Austria. So the social cultures are quite different in each of those countries. But senior execs need to understand that, and you need to understand that you can't impose, like if you're a global organization, you can't impose your way of doing things in your country on everybody else. I'll come to that in a second, but there are some things you should do and you have to do in order to set intention. But kind of as someone from the UK, I know that all the world's problems can be solved over a cup of tea. That's just the way we do things. It's classic Brits. If something's going wrong, let's have a cup of tea. Or if you're from Liverpool, just make someone laugh. That's the way that we deal with things. But, it doesn't work that way in, I don't know, Thailand or Brazil or Ethiopia or Mexico. They have different ways of doing things. But it's really, really important that, senior executives understand their social culture. Because that social culture is crucially important. right? Because essentially, the social culture generally drives behavioral norms of people that live within the social culture. So our social culture in Australia is one of fun, is one of enjoyment, it's one where outdoorsy, shrimps on the barbie, all of that kind of thing, right? And so people generally have that mindset, that outlook, because the quality of life here is fabulous. It's such a fantastic place to live. Listen, it's a million miles away from everywhere. Maybe that's why it's so fantastic, right? But that very much drives how people feel, how people interact. Now, so that, social culture is the first part of the culture, working culture piece. The second part is people and personalities. Now, what you can't do is say everybody in Australia is the same. They're not. They're different personalities, different backgrounds. And those people can influence the social culture. We're a product of our social culture. We're a product of our culture where we were brought up in. But also we can affect change. So if you look at the demonstrations going on in France right now, essentially the government who oversee the social culture and the fabric of it, they raised the pension age from 62 to 64. People in France didn't like it, so they're protesting in the hope that they can change the social culture and ultimately the law, right? This is what we do. But the right to demonstrate is a big part of the French culture. In Britain, we'd probably just queue to fill out a survey to say that we weren't happy or something like that. Like they're still trying to convince themselves Brexit was working. Oh God, I don't want to get political. This is not the news agents podcast. Anyway, so social culture is the first element. People and personality is the second element. And yes, we're a product of our environment, but also this, it's very much about how we build relationships with others. What are those patterns? Or how self-aware are we? What strengths do we have? Now, of course, as we get older, we become more aware of our preferences, and that helps us to build better relationships. Personality very much kind of dictates leadership style. Hogan and Kaiser found this in their seminal work on leadership in 2005. But people have to understand themselves if they're to contribute to something. And then the third, I suppose, foundation for working culture is how organizations construct themselves. So what's their purpose? What's their vision? What are their values? Now, we never used to talk about this stuff, but this is a sign of the way that the social culture in 2023 has influenced the way that business sets itself up. So the purpose of an organization is very much driven by the expectations of the social culture. And so the purpose generally is a representation of the views of the leadership team or the board of directors in relation to where they live and the pressures that they're under, their political leanings, whatever it might be. All right. So when we state our purpose, when we state our values, we put them out into the world. What we do is they're a representation of the social culture and the way the world is right now. And that's when we want to stay in lockstep with the world. This is what we're doing. But also, people and personalities are attracted to the purpose and the values that we put out into the world, right? So, and it's crucially important that the organizations live their values. Otherwise, it undermines not only the trust that people have in that organization, right? So that they won't then contribute, but also, depending on the organization or depending on the sector, it can have repercussions within the social culture. A great example is one of the big four here in Australia has been in the media recently because some of its partners did something that was unethical in terms of they had some confidential information that they used to pass on to key clients by way of offering advice to make money, essentially. All right? But one of their values was be ethical. And so clearly they went against the values. Now, partly that's the organization's fault for not training managers on how to actually live the values in the first place. I think so many organizations pay lip service to values. Lots of values are rubbish because I haven't really thought about all of these things that I'm talking about, right? And I get that this can be quite a jump. I really urge you to read the white paper. Obviously, I go into more detail and make it a lot more clearer, hopefully, than I am right now. the social culture is now looking at consulting generally and saying, hang on a minute, how much are we paying to these companies? And as someone, I don't really call myself a consultant. I call myself a facilitator, but I guess I guess you could call me a culture consultant if you really wanted. But I'm sure that people would scrutinise my work in the same way. How much are we paying people like these to do this work? The social culture is asking those questions, and at that point, it comes into the media. Now, social culture, people and personality, purpose and values are the foundations for working culture. All of those things determine what we need to build in order to consistently deliver high performance and achieve results. The culture definition process it's got an appreciation of all of those things. This is the work that I do, right? So when I run my culture workshops, I look at the social culture within which I'm working, very much look at people, personality, all of that kind of thing. And I use a personality profile to do that. I also look at the organization's purpose, values, strategy. And I would work between 6 and 8 organizations a year, people who really want to make it, people who are really interested in properly changing. And I immerse myself in this stuff to make sure that when we actually run the culture definition process, which takes 2 days, where we talk about behavior, collaboration, communication, innovation, all of the things that day to day really impact working culture, we actually lean on all of those foundations. And by the end of the 2 days, what we've created is not only something that means something to people because they've been part of the definition process, but it's also consistent and relevant for the world within which we live in right now. It speaks to things like how we use technology, how we behave to each other as human beings, how we make time to be creative, all of these things for the way that we work right now. And the role of executives is to understand not only those 3 foundations, but also then to understand that the building blocks that they're responsible for: strategy, goal definition, investment in culture making capability, decision making, and achievement of results. That all of those things, all of those building blocks of high performance, right? That's their responsibility, and they need to bring as much clarity to that as they possibly can in order to build a culture that can perform consistently well, deliver results, and at the same time avoid a slide into toxicity, appearing in the media. And at that point, what you've got is something that's undermining results for the future. So anyway, it's a bit longer on the podcast today, but I wanted to share that with you. So the white paper will be coming out this week. So this week commencing the 29th of the 5th. You can get it culturemakers.community, colindellis.com/boom, or follow me on LinkedIn, and we'll be posting a link for you to download it. Thank you so much for listening to the Culture Makers podcast today. I actually used 2 bottles of wine for the mulled wine, so I'm about to get another glass. Enjoy your day wherever you are in the world. Ta-ra for now.